He also consulted with both Max Healthcare and Life Healthcare Group in his previous position with the organization. Phathizwe completed his executive MBA from the Graduate School of Business, Cape Town, where he continues to guest lecture. He is also a Singularity University faculty candidate. Please welcome Phathizwe to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aki. Thank you. That was an incredible intro. I wish I could just be introduced like that every day. It's like coffee. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited really to be here. I think what I like, one of these things that I like about MyBroadband is I get to listen to like mind-blowing, my mind's still going with the last 3 talks that we heard, but we get to engage with you guys, and I think what I appreciate is discussing the future and what we expect out of kind of our continent. I think back to about the turn of the century, which is the year 2000, and I think of the future that we kind of are in. I remember just now Rashad talking about these choices that we have to make and the types of futures that we want, and this is one of the futures that I think we avoided. And it is by doing conferences like this where we get together, where we think, but more importantly, you get to talk to the people that actually do and shape this future. I think it was Abraham Lincoln and a lot of others afterwards who said the best way to predict the future is to create it. So in less than a decade from that point, we've kind of changed that word hopeless, into a word rising, something that is uprising, a more positive one. In fact, so much so that on the right-hand side, that cover of The Economist came out in March this year, and we're starting to see not just the belief of Africa in itself, but a lot of foreign companies coming in and realizing the opportunity that we have here. Because beyond just us doing something economically, it's quite amazing what you can achieve when we start talking about exactly what Prof. Brian Armstrong was talking about, which is sorting out this digital divide, right? And when I think about Africa, nothing really kind of changes for what we are here to do when it comes to creating our future, right? In about 2015 or so, there was a report that came out and talked about life expectancy. And I just didn't like the headline. The headline said South Africa has got the lowest life expectancy in the world. They weren't far off wrong from that, but I thought that's the kind of work that we need to be doing in terms of whatever we're doing. If you look at that digital divide, remove the word digital, it's that divide, it's that Gini coefficient, right? And when I looked at this graph, what they did is they plotted the life expectancy throughout the world looking at various regions in 1970, and then they looked at it again 40 years later. And the goal of, if you're on this graph, I know you can't see quite the detail, is if you look at the red line, that horizontal line, you want to move as far right as possible from that line, because that means you're succeeding. You're changing your life expectancy of the region. When I looked at it, one of the things I personally thought of was, yeah, it must be high income. You know, if you've got lots of money, you're going to have a good life expectancy, but B, you'll be able to shift that life expectancy. But when we look at those high-income countries, not much. We're talking about at tops 10 years that they've done in that period. But when we look at the low-income areas, and in particular Asia, they managed to do even more than their high-income areas when you talk about Taiwan and all of this. And that's really what they did when they took advantage of the third industrial revolution. So now sitting in this fourth industrial revolution, we've kind of squandered that third industrial revolution for lots of different reasons, but we sit at a point where we can make a difference and we can shift in the next couple of years our life expectancy. And that's kind of what's exciting and what we're seeing when it comes to the continent. So how we improve it, and we look at that UN thing, we look at why do we die? What's one of the main reasons that affects life expectancy? And generally it's disease. There's lots of other things, but if we look at disease, there's 2 types of disease. One associated with the word cure, which is the non-communicable, and then one associated with the word prevent. If we can change the environment, we can prevent some of these diseases. And so if we look at that axis, but we look at it with Africa versus the rest of the world, when we look at the data, we do realize that if we were to try and sort out the non-communicable part, the cure part, we're actually not going to move that much further when we look at that data. We're sitting at about 652 in terms of the country, and then the rest of the world is sitting at 539. But when we look at the top end of it, we're sitting at 683 preventable diseases, things like malaria, things like TB, things like HIV, things like hepatitis, things like cholera. You know, those are the type of things that if we sort out the environments associated with those, we could do this leapfrog thing that we talk about and get to this 178. So that's the work that I think we're out here to do as South Africans kind of working. The last time I was here, I spoke a lot about that low-income area. I spoke about it, I referred to it as the unserviced community, and the unserviced market, rather. And we heard already, even from MTN, them talking about 17 million unbanked people, 8 of them completely unbanked, and a lot of these unserviced markets. But what I want to try and do this year is get a bit more meatier, a bit more real, and a bit more in South Africa, and introduce you to some of these communities. So I'd like us to just take a look at this video.
This place is rural. This area is far from the city, far from the activities of the economy.
Some they call it forgotten people. Job course, it looks like we are forgotten by our municipality and our government. Job course. Since I have been born, I never seen a civic delivery in this village. Yeah. I'm sitting here with my chief, Mabira Zogonara. Is the one who is leading those 3 villages, Kwakwani, Mbodi, and then Matatan. And he is in charge of these 3 villages.
So I'm feeling good now about this project. So I want to thank the University of Johannesburg.
Solar panel, they'll be able to open the bakery where they'll be baking bread.
So which means we are going to eat bread, fresh bread from the village. Before we were waiting Christmas to come, and Good Friday to come, if visitors to come, just because you can come with bread and then you start to eat bread. So now it's going to be much easier. And then bread in this side is very expensive just because they do charge transport. They said this place is too far. So you need to pay 10 rand, you need to pay 15 rand for per loaf.
Oh, I'm very glad with the bakery. And I think this bakery it will help everyone who stays in Kwakwani, Matatani, Mbodi. Before, we started to eat bread mainly on the Christmas days. So now, every day we will get bread here at Kwakwani. Every morning, we will eat bread.
It's the high-risk malaria site area in this Kwakwani. Every year, more than 20 people go to clinic affected by malaria. Malaria linked to Donald Fraser affected the malaria.
So they came and installed solar pump.
The boil water is better than the river water because the boil water is coming from down.
Project connection and the university and all the sponsors there.
Never to take life for granted. Appreciate what you have.
Okay, so that video was brought to you by Schneider Electric. That's the village of Kwakwani. And those students are the students from the University of Johannesburg. And I think about what they did, and I kind of want to tell you the story of what they did to this village, how they used technology to move that communicable disease death rate kind of down. This is a lot of them. They're from the electrical engineering. And they did a couple of things that I think are quite amazing in terms of Kwakwani. the first thing that they did is they thought, this is a very big project and we want to do it in stages that can be consumed by this village. This village has got about 100 people in it and about 35 households. So in that video, you already saw 3% of all of Kwakwane, right? And what they first did is they put up solar panels, and from those solar panels, they were able to produce electricity, and they put up a couple of street lights in the community. And for the first time, they had electricity in that area. Then from that, that video that we saw now is they dug up and put a borehole and a whole solar pump system so that they can have fresh water into the village. Now, when they spoke about that malaria, they were suffering about 35 cases of malaria per season, or per year. And they've dropped that down from 105 all the way down to 5, right? And then from there they thought, okay, now we've got the basis, we've got the electricity and the water sorted, what else can we do for this community? And a lot of the children couldn't walk the 6 kilometers to the closest primary school until they were a certain age. So it was an opportune environment to put up a creche with the technology that they had. But this creche also starts doubling in the nighttime versus the daytime, where it starts sorting out these kids that are going to primary, walking 6 kilometers, or the students that are in high school that have to walk a further 18 kilometers, and giving them a place to start doing their homework in the middle of the night. From that, of course, you also saw the bakery. The bakery is a very big initiative. It started giving them bread. They were literally getting bread once a year. You know, that's how much bread cost for them. It was a luxury, so they'd get it around Christmas time. Now they're able to produce more loaves than they have people in that village, to a point where they can start selling more bread into the neighboring villages. And then finally, in the creche, what they did last year is they put up the first television. In 2018, there's a village that got TV for the very first time. And what that brought from that education social ill is it started bringing educational content to the people who didn't have the opportunity to go through a schooling system. So now you have a very fully fledged Kwakwane, a Kwakwane kind of 2.0. With these assets, the biggest worry that the community had was how our lives have changed right now. What will happen if we lose these assets? So they assigned 2 people from the village who were tasked with ensuring that, you know, the boreholes are always working, ensuring that the bakery is working, that maintenance kind of crew. But as they went through the stages in terms of putting this technology into Kwakwane, they realized that the level of expertise, I think Rashad called it appropriate skills, wasn't at the point that you can sort out a borehole and you can sort out a fridge and you can sort out a solar pump. So I wanted to maybe just give you a picture of what would happen if they lost water for a day or for 2 days. That fresh water system allowed them to plumb a tap into each one of those 35 households. A lot of those households have now got food security because they're able to do vegetable gardening. They do it so well that, again, even there, they're producing a surplus and they're starting to sell into the community. So with these very simple technologies, they're able to now become an income-generating village. They've changed their economic outlook. And when it comes to that increased life expectancy, if you've dropped your malaria cases by over 100 in 3 seasons, you've definitely shifted that needle towards the right. But what if that borehole breaks? One of the downsides of being in an area like Kwakwane is the reception when it comes to cellular is not the most ideal. Some of the villages around them have got Edge and they've got GPRS, but they just happen to sit in this zone where their cell phone service is very intermittent. And then on top of that, of course, they've got no electricity because, as they call themselves, the forgotten people, some of them have never seen service delivery in their lifetimes. So what the University of UJ students did is they went out and they looked for what's available in terms of technology, 5G, 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi, fiber, what can we get into this community? And what they settled on was we need a network that can run off very little power, because the power is a scarce resource and it is a asset to the community that they wouldn't want to lose out on. So they contacted us. As SqwidNet, we run Sigfox, low power network, and we went out there and we were able to find a hill, a nice suitable hill where we could put up this infrastructure, which is really what you see right there is an entire base station, an entire antenna that could get to all the assets that they have in that field. And then the borehole broke, just as they feared. And what's interesting is what happened to it is what I'm excited about when I think about the Internet of Things. Somebody didn't have to go and see that the borehole had broken. The borehole knew that it had broken with the sensors that it was attached to it. So it knew it was in distress, and it sent out a message to the University of Johannesburg. They got the message, they assembled a team, and they shot out to the village as quickly as possible. They managed to fix that borehole. They managed to keep the water uninterrupted without the citizens of Gwakwani even realizing. And for me, that's the power of IoT. Moving from a world where we're just continuously generating data, but needing a very high skill to look at it, to the asset itself actually speaking and getting us to react to that situation. But the nice thing about IoT, it's beyond just reaction, right? I think I always say from IoT, you do get three things. You get an ability to alert something, and what you're seeing on the screen now is the ability to also monitor things remotely, because now they had remote visibility to this village. They could attach sensors at a very, very low cost that run off battery so that if they do lose power, they can know what's happening on those assets. But the third one, which is the holy grail of just not IoT, but the holy grail of the fourth industrial revolution, is for us to start generating the kind of insight at a level that we can consume and understand so that we take action. And we take action in time so that villages like Gwakwani do not lose out on this asset. I know you can't see a whole lot of that screen, but focus on the dials. And for me, that is actionable insight. The dial has got red, amber, green, right? So at this point, the borehole hasn't broken, but when the dial moves into red, all of us know red means impending disaster. So you can now start sending a team out and fixing this thing and moving into a space of preventable with very simple technologies that are within reach for the low-income people as well. I think the low-power wide area network, or as we like to call it, SqwidNet, is making a very big difference when it comes to this population coverage that we've been talking about. We heard MTN talk about 95% coverage. We need that from all of our technologies, from 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, and even low power area network. I think Sigfox loves to call that network 0G. It'll grow on me. But it really is about having complete coverage to these areas so that we can increase that life expectancy. When we look at that area, we really cover it now over 90% in terms of outdoor. But more importantly, even in our suburbs, when we're getting into our homes in the metros, indoor also counts. Because we can use this technology to monitor our water, monitor our water usage. I've got a swimming pool that started leaking, and I wasn't aware it was leaking until my swimming pool alerted me to say there's a possible leak here. And when you're starting to put IoT devices indoor, the coverage is also very important, and we cover that quite well indoor as well. But when I talk about assets, a lot of our assets are sometimes on the road. So from a SqwidNet point of view, we also looked at assets in transit, and we said if we're looking at a vehicle as an asset, the occupants of a vehicle as an asset, or the goods that the vehicle is transporting as an asset, we need to be able to, at all times, be able to cover and listen to that asset once it goes into distress. So even there, we've got over 90% coverage. And what excites me isn't the paved road coverage that we have, but when it comes to gravel roads, we've got over 500,000 kilometers covered there as well. So beyond a village like Gwakwani, it goes into every industry, and that's what kind of IoT does for us. Whether that industry is below the ground, like mining, or above the ground, things like agriculture or manufacturing, shipping those goods, like I said, assets in transit, into our cities, into our stores, and eventually into our homes. We need a network that is able to allow assets to speak. And sometimes it's not even just the asset, it's the environment that those assets sit in. Because we, as much as continuous is beautiful and continuous is something that we can look at, the asset itself needs to be empowered to tell us when it is in distress so that we can take actionable action, I guess. And beyond that, of course, get into that world of actionable insight. So my challenge for all of you here today, and growing from that unserviced community, is let's remember the forgotten people of Kwakwani and remember more villages that are like Kwakwani. And I throw the gauntlet down again, but become a bit more tangible when I say, if Asia in that 1970 to 2010 were able to change their life expectancy by 30 years, we can do the same using 4IR. So let's, in the next 30 years, increase our life expectancy by 30 years through innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phathizwe. Man, that was such an inspiring story, you know. And I mean, you guys get me to test some of the stuff that you're working on, and I've got to tell the audience. I mean, I've got one of your very simple, simple for you guys, but you know, I've got this thing stuck on my fridge door. And every time I open and close my fridge door, I get a signal on my phone.
Yes.
Every time there's any kind of vibration, I get a signal on my phone. If there's a change in temperature in my home, I get a signal on my phone. And then, of course, you've got that GPS locator, which is using your network, which is extraordinary. What kind of trends are you seeing with regards to SqwidNet and IoT and these similar devices? I mean, these are the nice fun stuff, but I'm sure there's a lot of business applications that are running on your network, right?
Absolutely, and what we're seeing is a lot of companies that are addressing South Africa's ills are starting to use our network quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the top priority in our ills, when we look at Cape Town, we look at the water drought, and we're starting to see water meters and water metering being a very big driver when it comes to IoT, and then security as well is very big in our area. So we're seeing a lot of, what's nice about what our network is, it's complementary. So a lot of the guys are using telematics, they're looking forward to 5G, they want that low latency, you want to be able to control the car, but in our country there's also crime, there's also people that can jam your vehicle, and we want to know when you're in distress. So what they're starting to use is our network, because it's virtually unjammable, unless you've got a military truck, and you work with those military guys, which a lot of us don't have. And one of our engineers always jokes and says, and when you blast that EMP, the least of your worries will be Sigfox connectivity.
But it's you guys are going to stand again here today.
We absolutely do.
Right at the back there. So go and visit the stand. They've got some amazing, interesting stuff that they're working on. Are you at liberty to divulge how many connected devices you have on the SqwidNet network?
I'm not yet allowed to say that, but I am allowed to say that we've got over 1,000 base stations that cover the country now, and each base station has the ability of listening to 1 million messages and holding 1 million messages should anything happen.
Wow, so you've got 1,000 base stations, each base station has the ability to listen to 1 million messages.
So that means at any one point in time, we can listen to 1 billion messages.
Wow, that's amazing. And so it's all little small chunks of data that's just going through your network constantly. And of course, it's a separate network, right? So you're not reliant on, you know, the 3G networks, etc. This is your own band that you've got. Are you reliant on other networks as well?
At the back of it, we are reliant. So we're very excited about fiber. We're very excited about mobile. We are partners of mobile companies, of fiber companies, because we co-locate in terms of the towers. But we are a separate network. We run on the free spectrum, which is 868. And the beauty about that one is I always say it's like the SOS days.
Yes.
You know, if your ship is in distress, you don't want to send a message and somebody goes, "Who are you?"
Exactly.
Aki, are you in distress, Aki? But before you tell me, can you prove you're Aki? Can you click on these 3 bridges to show that you're a human being?
No, absolutely. But I think ultimately where SqwidNet wants to go is, and I love this analogy that I heard many years ago when they spoke about IoT, the moment you have this data and you're collecting lots of amounts of data from different sources, you can now start putting in predictive analytics and algorithms and almost turn your network into like a central nervous system. So you know exactly what's going on with regards to temperature, and then you can start predicting things before they actually happen, right?
Absolutely.
And that's ultimately where you guys are going with
100%, and I think that's why we named the company SqwidNet, because, you know,
all the tentacles.
According to Richard Shah, a squid has over 1 billion sensors on its body. And what we want is we want to have a network that has the ability to listen to 1 billion sensors.
Awesome stuff, Phathizwe. Thank you so much.